Okay, this short podcast is about reading a poem. It's chapter 13 in your book, and all of the materials I use in here, freely quoting from, are taken from the text. So you can read the text, like I suggested, and pick up everything again. Miller Williams said that every good poem begins as the poet's but ends as the reader's. And the reason behind you doing all these checklists and explicating a poem is so that you can become the owner of that poem. It starts out as the poet's, but it ends up yours. So the first chapter we're going to use is Unlucky Chapter 13, and we're going to follow the suggestions in the book, which are really quite good, although very densely packed. And the first question we might ask ourselves is, what does poetry do? And ignore the cats trying to get in the back behind me in the picture. Poetry appeals to things of the heart and things of the mind and things of the heart and the mind together. And it should appeal. You should choose a poem that appeals to you, not one that you think I will like. Don't be a strategic student about this. Be a smart student. Be an emotionally intelligent student. Find one that you can live with in your mind and your heart. Poetry is also imaginative. Poets figure out ways to involve us in their imaginary worlds. Because that's all they are, right? They're imaginary. No matter how real they describe them, they come from the poet's mind. Some people call the mind the 4-pound universe. And it's really quite true. Each of us has a universe atop our spinal columns and inside our cranium. If you look on page 632 of the text, the authors put it quite simply that while there may be all kinds of elements of poetry, and we're going to study those, and we're going to use those tools, those elements, to pick apart a poem, and don't worry, you're not going to kill the poem. There are elements, sounds, images, rhythms, figures of speech. And that's all well and good, but what does it mean? What does poetry do? What's it supposed to accomplish? If you look at a poem as a puzzle or a secret code with a message that's concealed in it, then that's all you get, is the message. But there's a larger effect, and it consists of much more than the message. T.S. Eliot once said that the prose sense of a poem, in other words, the part that you can actually paraphrase, you can actually describe to somebody else, and you say, well, this poem means this, or this poem describes this. That prose element is chiefly useful in keeping the reader's mind diverted and quiet while the poem does its work on him. You might think of the poem as the prose part of the poem, was the part that you're going to paraphrase, as being the distraction while the poet flies underneath your radar to get at your unconscious. So, according to the authors, what is the work of the poem? Well, it's to touch us, to stir us, and to make us glad, and possibly even to tell us something. So, how do we find this touching, stirring meaning? Well, we have to read them. And we have to plunge in and have to read it from start to finish and not worry about anything else. We're not worried about the meaning. We just soldier through. The meaning will come. You're going to have at it a bunch of times, so don't worry about it. The second time you read it, you might read it again for the exact sense of all the words. I'm going to show you a poem here in a minute, Lake Isle of Innisfree by William Butler Yeats. And in it, there are 2 or 3 words that might need a little bit of explanation. You might have to look up. But then again, there are lots and lots of common words in that poem that you might want to think about in other terms. Um, so you need to know what all the words mean, and you need to have a rough sense of the topic of the poem. And then the third time, you might want to read it aloud or listen to someone else read it aloud, like this person right here from LibriVox.
The Lake Isle of Innisfree by William Butler Yeats. Reading by Annie Coleman for LibriVox.org. I will arise and go now, and go to Innisfree, and a small cabin build there, of clay and wattles made. 9 bean rows will I have there, a hive for the honey bee, and live alone in the bee-loud glade. And I shall have some peace there, for peace comes dropping slow, dropping from the vales of the morning to where the cricket sings. There midnight's all a glimmer, and noon a purple glow, and evening full of the linnet's wings. I will arise and go now, for always night and day I hear lake water lapping with low sounds by the shore, while I stand on the roadway or on the pavements gray. I hear it in the deep heart's core. End of poem.
And you can hear it in the deep heart's core. But that's really not what a paraphrase is about. The paraphrase is a brief statement of the poem's content, putting it into your own words line by line. And you also might state out loud what is only implied or hinted at in the poem. But basically, you want the person who's reading your paraphrase to know what the poem is about, its topic and its theme, which I'll talk about in a minute. Now, don't worry, they talk in the book about this only half jokingly. These poems are not, when you dissect them, you don't kill them, or you shouldn't. They can handle the rough work of analysis. In fact, they paradoxically get stronger and tougher the more you look at them. And they also get bigger and fuller and full of more experience for you as well. Here's the poem. There are some interesting aspects to this. You could look at the rhythms in the poem. But one thing I might want to point out, something we'll talk about when we get to the chapter on sound, which you may have noticed when you listened to it. The last line of the poem, when she says, while I stand on the roadway or on the pavement's gray, I hear it in the deep heart's core. It's really fascinating to think about that the poet actually chose to start from a high frequency word like deep all the way down to a low frequency word like core. Please ignore the microwave in the background. That's another sound entirely. So he goes from deep heart's core. It's as if he is actually going inside himself into his deep heart's core. He's actually descending just like you would go from a high to the low. Some people say, did he really intend to do that? Yes, he did. He really did. He worked on this poem for a long time. He kind of came to hate it in his later life simply because every time he did a reading, someone would ask for it. It's like musicians. They don't like to do their popular songs anymore. One of the things, besides the line-by-line appreciation of the poem itself, is that you need to talk about the theme and the subject in the poem. Now, the subject is simply the topic of the poem, what it's about. And in Lake Isle of Innisfree, the subject is the island itself and the simple wish to go to it as a retreat. That's it. That's all the poem. That's all the subject matter of the poem. Not much happens, just kind of wishes for stuff. Now, the theme of the poem is its central focus, which is a little bit different. The subject is kind of the periphery, the details, but the focus is what it is at its heart. And at its heart, this poem says, And usually a theme will be in the form of a sentence, while a subject might just be a word or a phrase. But the theme of Lake Isle might be, I want to be free in a place I can call my own, where I can have peace and happiness. When you do your paraphrase for the assignment, make sure you put both in there, because both will provide a focus for you as you write your explication paper. What does the poem really mean? And you might get into this in your paraphrase, or you might not, because although I've read this poem dozens of times, I find new stuff in it all the time. And I've looked at a picture of Innisfree. This right here is a picture of Innisfree, the actual island of Innisfree, and I hope it doesn't ruin the image for you. But I've seen little islands like this in Kentucky lakes all my life as a fisherman. And I know you all, wherever you all are, you've seen islands like this as well. So it makes me think, is he really talking about this island? Or is it something else? Maybe how to get there. Maybe it's a map for how to get there. And so I took Google Maps and I put in Western Kentucky University to Ireland, Lake Isle of Innisfree, and asked for directions. Unfortunately, it says we could not calculate directions between Western and Ireland. Well, that's just ridiculous. Does this mean we can't get there from here? No. It just means we have to go there some other way. Well, in reality, we'd go there by plane, or maybe we'd walk across the frozen sea, Bering Sea, to get to it through Russia. That'd be a kind of a backwards way of going. But I think what it means is you have to use the poetry as a way to get there. And I'm going to give you a hint as to what that might be. Maybe this is what Yeats meant. Would this be in a paraphrase? It might. If you're really quick, you might include a lot of things in a paraphrase like this. But it probably wouldn't be. So this is a little bit of the depth that you might be looking for later on as you come to know your poem in Innisfree. This has been the first podcast on paraphrasing and how to do it. I hope it helps. If I can, I will be producing more screencasts. I'm learning how to use several different kinds of screencasting software. So wish me luck, and I'll wish you luck as well. Take care.